Hi everyone, we are live, and as you see, we have a very special guest with us today, which is Riley. Welcome.
Hey, good to see you guys.
And I meant to actually, so for those of you who haven't seen Riley's comments, Riley is also a guest in a Talking Insomnia episode, which I meant to check out the number, but anyone who wants to hear more about Riley's story, it is in the playlist of like success stories that you'll find it there. But yeah, how are you, Riley?
Doing well. We were just chatting really quickly before we started broadcasting, but it's incredibly cold in Texas. If any Texans watching, this is abnormal territory for us.
Incredible, yeah. Now be careful out there.
Yep.
Very well. So, I just quickly for anyone that is new to the channel, Riley, Riley had an episode of quite a lot of insomnia and really worked your way past that, and so I'm really happy to have your input here. And so we'll just look at four emails and if there's some live comments too. And so let's just jump in here. The first one was from Balint here. Let me read this. Hi, Daniel and Michael and Riley. First of all, I would like to thank you for your effort for this channel. That gives me so much hope in order to recover my sleep. Also, thanks for Set It and Forget It, which was one of the best books I ever read on the topic. My question is that what about those people who are suffering with depression? I know it would be better to avoid Google search, but according to many pages, this condition reshapes your sleep with more REM and less deep sleep. Does it make sense? Is it possible to do this behavior with CBTi? I think maybe change this behavior with CBTi. So Balint, I first want to say thanks so much for sending the question, and thanks for reading my book and all the support. And so my thoughts here become these, yes, it's true that when you Google and research, you often come across things that are very scary and it's not helpful. Now, when it comes to depression, it has been noted that if you study somebody's sleep architecture, it's different from when you're not depressed, but that doesn't really mean anything in particular. If you take 100 people and look at their sleep stages and stuff like that, you'll see a lot of variability. You see somebody who has no REM sleep and they feel they sleep great, or super fragmented sleep and they sleep great. And so I wouldn't, that plays really no role. It's sleep stages is really sort of it's like air, it's there, but you can't do anything about it. So I wouldn't pay any attention whatsoever to that. And furthermore, I want to say, when it comes to this more bigger question of what if I have insomnia, but I also have anxiety, I also have a depression, my go-to thing for that has become it really all comes from really the same thing. There's this discomfort within us, something we don't want to experience, whether it's thoughts or emotions. And the more we don't want to have that, the stronger it gets. And when you start learning about sleep, which you can do on this channel, so much you learn about it, you can apply to other parts of your life. So those are kind of my immediate thoughts when I read this. And so how about you, Riley? What are your thoughts when you hear this?
Yeah, well, my first thought is empathy, because I have gone through depression and anxiety and insomnia, and you're so right. They tend to not only come from the same place, but they tend to come together a lot of the time, which can be really rough. So I know what you're feeling. I'm not an expert on sleep stages by any means, so I won't speak to that. But I totally agree. The more thought you're putting into how you can optimize your sleep, your brain is trying to control something that you don't really have control over. And so you guys talk about this on the channel a lot, but trying to move your attention away from those things that you have no control over into things that you actually can control, like enjoying your day, which is certainly tough when you're depressed. But trying to do things that you like, that you enjoy doing during the day. Talk with people, I think, is incredibly helpful for if you're depressed, and therapy can be incredibly good too. Also, I think journaling, writing down those things that you're anxious about or you're depressed about, even just writing down, I'm anxious that my sleep is not as refreshing as I want it to be, or I'm anxious that I'm not in control of my sleep, kind of helps tell your brain, hey, I'm listening to you. I got you. You may not need to worry about that, but I'm listening. So those are just things that come to my mind.
Absolutely. And, when you said this about talking to people, Sierra, who you saw that, so she was here with us yesterday, and she talked about how something that was helpful to her was like talking to her family, and just and again, not so much for like, not for sleep advice or sleep tips, because that can be go the other way, but just sharing how you're feeling and talking about. Absolutely. And one thing I don't want to forget here is like when we first talked here on the channel, Riley, like you said something towards the end, which was like, I want to try to quote it, but it was something like this. It was like every evening or every night, you have this opportunity to see that there's something in your life you don't have any control over, like you almost have that as an opportunity, and which is super true. But I was like taking a walk the other day, and that came to my mind, and then I saw like that is so applicable to everything. It's almost like every moment of your life, you have an opportunity to see that there's very little you can control, and that can be so freeing, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's when you're more anxious, you are more likely to obsess about all the things that you can't control in your life. And it's not that you just didn't think about them before you were anxious. They just kind of happened, and whether it's sleep or certain parts of your day. So yeah, writing those things down, listening to your brain, being like, okay, I'm really anxious about this, but accepting that invitation to consider being okay with that. That it's an opportunity to talk back to your brain and say, actually, we don't have control over that. And that can be kind of scary, but it's gonna be okay.
Absolutely. And by the way, that segues back into those sleep stages. We have zero control of sleep stages. So just, that can be liberating to know that. And okay, very cool. So Balint, I hope that made sense to you. Any follow-up questions, let us know, and we'll jump to number 2 here. It's a little bit longer message, but not very long at all. I think we can read the whole thing and then go from there. So Linde said, hello, Michael. So it's me and Riley here instead, but I think we can answer this. She says, thank you very much for taking these questions. For the first time in my life, I developed insomnia, January of 19. So that's like 2 years ago. Stressful events after about 8 months. My sleep did improve. In April of 20, I went downhill again with insomnia. I ended up doing a 6-week CBTi course through Martin Reed, starting in mid-July 2020. My average night was 4 hours, often with no sleep. It took about 5 to 6 weeks to see improvement doing sleep restriction and stimulus control. I would sleep well for a few weeks, then have a few bad nights, and found these hard to deal with, but did get through. It's been 22 weeks since I finished the course. In the last couple of weeks, I have been having terrible sleep again. 4 nights of no sleep in the last 2 weeks, with few 4 7-hour nights. I felt desperate and wondered, how should I go back to full-on CBTi? I do get up sometimes when I don't sleep, but mostly lie there trying to accept, etc. But often end up frustrated. I've tried ACT. I have Guy Meadows' book. I understand the concepts. However, implementing is hard. I think I'm an overly obsessive person trying to work things out. I know what I should be doing, accepting, etc. I can for a time, then I go back trying to fix. Would appreciate your advice. Thank you, Linde. This has become one, this is actually a very common question, Linde. And I want to start off by saying this, that your situation is actually a very common one. And it goes back to what you said, actually, Riley, about the confusion of when we're not trying to control something, it happens by itself. And then we think back and said, when I was sleeping well, I had some control. Where did that control go before? But to be more specific here, Linde, you had a stressful event, started some insomnia, then you slept better again, and then you had more trouble sleeping, and then you went through this course. And it may seem, particularly when you go through a course, that it is the spending less time in bed, the sleep restriction and the stimulus control, like getting out of bed when you can't sleep, that is the reason you did see improvement. Like it can seem like you did things and then you slept better, and now you have trouble sleeping. It's like, should I do those things to sleep better? But that was actually not why you slept better. The reason you slept better was probably you learned things and you felt, better having a coach, and you actually did less. You were actually weirdly more okay with being awake at night. You were less resistant to it. And that's what led you to sleep better. So you have actually already seen the magic of like doing less. And when you ask, like, should I do full on CBTi again? I think the answer is no. You should, you're on the right path with acceptance. It's just like seeing that you have the magic within you, and you've already done less, and that was what led you to sleep better. So those are my immediate thoughts. And Riley, so you were nodding, so I'm sure you have some thoughts here. What are your thoughts when you hear this? And by the way, did you ever do CBTi?
No, well, I downloaded BedTyme and SleepEddy, and I wanted to do a program through there, and I never did any formal program, but I implemented at the very beginning some of the like sleep restriction stuff, and got kind of freaked out and kind of ditched it after a little while. But oh man, this reason I'm nodding is because this sounds so much like me. So I'm totally with you. Linde, I guess was their name. Totally with you. Like, there's this thing that happens once we start learning a bunch, and we may have gone through a program that we're like, oh, this is all new information. This is incredible information. And we can maybe believe that what we need is continually more and more and more and more information, or more and more and more behavior modifications. And after you get good information, which it sounds like you Linde, like there's a lot of good information that you have, and you kind of know how sleep works. Then just like Daniel was saying, like that letting go piece, which is the hardest piece, but that's the next place to go. It's not necessarily, for me, it was like, I read every single book and then I wanted more books. I'm like, okay, well, what's the next book I'm going to read? When in reality, I had the knowledge of how sleep worked. And what I needed to do was focus on enjoying my day, and really letting go of, I needed to maybe stop reading those books for a little while. So yeah, the first thing I think about when I read the story is like, oh my gosh, I totally, like, I get this. And I will say, and you guys talk about this all the time, but I think it's so good. The timeless night is so helpful, especially when you're in the process of beginning to let go. When you stop looking at the clock and say, hey, I'm not gonna look at the clock. That's such a practical way to begin to let go. And I find too, like I went through a patch of a few rough nights a couple of weeks ago because I was super stressed about something. And I found if I didn't look at the clock, I had a hard time. First of all, I had a hard time knowing really how long I had been awake at night. And second of all, I tended to forget about those awakenings. I just didn't think about them during the day. But when something about looking at the clock for people who are struggling with insomnia, it like creates a timestamp. And then, well, now I'm going to think about that time all day. Okay, I got no sleep. I got 4 hours. So, Linde, I would maybe say, like, try a night where you go to bed when you're sleepy and don't look at the clock at all the whole night, and see what happens. And even if you are awake for a significant part of the night, I think, at least in my case, it's been this way, you will be more likely to forget about it the next day and just go about your day, because you're not applying those timestamps to it. So that's just Linde, when you were mentioning time, that just kind of came to mind.
100%. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's another thing I thought about when we read this message from Linde, was that the timeless night, I think, is very important, just like for the reasons Riley brought up here. But you can really extend that like timelessness further out. So where I'm going here is to say, like, Linde, in your message, you said like it was 22 weeks since I stopped Martin's course, which just tells us that you've been checking every week. It's been 23 weeks. And if that's very understandable, because it is, insomnia comes from this place of like loss of control, and you want to have some sense of control. But when you extend that timelessness to that, to like, okay, I'm not going to keep track of how many weeks it was. I'm not going to particularly expect that I'm going to sleep so and so much, or like that timeless way is so helpful. And again, I think we saw in this message a lot of like, I slept 4 hours, then it was 7 hours, and like, again, letting go of that will be really helpful to you, Linde. And I guess the last thing I want to say here is that Guy Meadows, his book, his approach is very much about acceptance, and I think I'm totally on board with that. The tricky thing is that everything can become an effort. It's like, I'm trying to accept it. I'm trying to accept it. And then when you're trying to accept it, then you're actually not doing that. It's so tricky.
One more quick thought, just even on the timeless piece. It worked this way for me, and maybe this is you, Linde, but I think I was also estimating the time that I was awake and asleep incorrectly. And so I'm not assuming that you're doing that, Linde, but maybe consider the possibility that you might be sleeping more than you think. And even that, like, little bit of hope in my brain has been really helpful for me, where I'm like, I feel like I was up all night, or like I looked at the clock and it was, which that's something, you know, you can stop doing. I looked at the clock every hour, and I think I was up the whole night. But then in the day I feel fine. That felt a little odd. So you might be sleeping more than you think you are. Doesn't mean your suffering isn't real. You probably feel terrible, but that little bit of hope can be helpful as like a, oh, I don't think I have the control over this that I think I do. I think my body's sleeping in some ways that I can't perceive.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I hear that very often when people are like, I think I sleep more than I think I sleep more than I think, you know, and that actually brings hope. Exactly. Very well. Well, let's, Linda, thanks for sharing this, and let us know again if there's follow-up questions. And now a little different one here from Hans. So Hans writes the following: can you feature this guy, Karl Marcieca? He has been sleeping only 2 to 3 hours a night for more than 6 months now, and that's with medications. Without medications, he cannot sleep at all, and even those medications are slowly becoming ineffective. And so now he has to overdose on them just to fall asleep. He's been to various doctors, neurologists, and psychiatrists, but his condition is just getting worse. Here is his YouTube channel where he documents his condition. This is from Hans again. So have you heard of him?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I've had a couple of questions from him. So basically, he has been, I think, at least 11 months he's been on YouTube, and he basically, I saw a couple of videos of him, and he's talking about how, like, I'm on like 500 milligrams of trazepam, 500 milligrams of Mitrol, 2 milligrams of this, and still I sleep very little. Which, of course, I not to belittle what he's going through. I think he's not in a good place, but the probably like two things that come up is like people are worried that, oh, does he have like sporadic fatal insomnia, and what's going on with that? Well, again, no medical advice on this channel, but if somebody had that he doesn't, to me, somebody who can talk cohesively, like who can express themselves, who can shoot a video and upload it on YouTube, does not have that. That's just not that's just impossible. But another thing that is kind of confusing here is this one, where often people become really worried when they're like, they had trouble sleeping, and then they take something like trazodone, and then nothing changes, and then the interpretation of that becomes something is really wrong with me, because not even with medications do I sleep, which is understandable. But when you understand sleep, you know that sleep cannot happen. Sleep comes from the inside, always, always, always. Yep. Medications just cannot make you sleep. All they can do is make you kind of sedated. But if you are worried and anxious, it really, truly doesn't matter how much medications you take. They will not make you sleepy. So it's not actually surprising at all that somebody is very worried, they take medications, it doesn't work, they become worried, they take more. It's not strange at all that this kind of pattern forms. So those were my big thoughts here. What do you think, Riley?
Yeah, this is a little more on the medical end of the question, which is very much out of my my realm of knowledge. But I'm not familiar with Karl. I can't help but a couple of things come to mind. First of all, is I just feel bad for anyone who's watching his videos, because I'm sure it is terrifying. So if you're watching them, I would recommend to not do that. I recommend to not watch those videos. I don't know Karl. I have no idea what his situation is. Whenever I hear that he has been to doctors and neurologists and no one knows what's going on, I think you have more experience with this than I do, but I feel like that is a pretty rare occurrence, that a number of people would say, we have no idea what's going on. And especially in this situation, which seems to be a fairly common situation. So that kind of hits my brain a little weird. And secondly, I also can't help but wonder, again, I don't know this guy or his channel, but if you start a channel kind of chronicling these events happening to you, I wonder if that also kind of lodges it in your brain of, this is who I am, and therefore it just keeps propagating the insomnia. So not familiar with the channel. I would advise anyone probably to not watch those videos, because they're probably not going to be helpful. And overwhelmingly, there's stories like Karl's, but overwhelmingly the stories of people who begin to let go of their sleep, they sleep incredibly well, and they sleep so much better when they begin to let go and they begin to follow natto principles. And and acceptance. And so you'll find crazy stories out there on Reddit or on Facebook, and you can find them, but overwhelmingly the statistics are following these principles, people sleep, incredibly well.
100%, and that was a good point that I hadn't really reflected on myself, is that if you create a YouTube channel predicated upon your story about not sleeping, then yes, it can affect your identity. And also, like, I mean, you want to share a story, and then if you sleep better, then like
the story's over.
The story's over, So that's true. And also about what you said, like nobody understands. I think this is a tricky one. This is a real tricky one, because I think it is actually fairly common that somebody has these symptoms, whatever they can be, like joint pain or like just like this itch here, and like these things that are undefined, and like I can't sleep, and you see a doctor and they try some sleep medications, but still nothing happens. Then of course they refer to a neurologist, and a lot of these doctors probably know, they probably feel that this is more mental health, this is anxiety there, but either it's hard for them to say that because they see that person is suffering. They don't know much about anxiety, so it's hard for them to say, I think this is anxiety, because they're afraid of the reaction being like, what do you mean? How can this be anxiety? Or they simply, so I think it can easily become interpreted for the patient that nobody understands it. Well, they actually aren't maybe given honest feedback from the doctor for reasons that I'm empathetic to, because the doctors don't know what to do either. So that's another thing that can play in here,
Yeah.
So, okay. Thanks so much, Hans. Hope that was helpful. Now, let's talk about our next one, which is from Jake here. So let's read it. Hi, I'm writing for you the third time as your device has proved helpful recently. Unfortunately, this time I think things may have made a turn for the worse. My sleeping pattern is terrible, partly due to the lockdown we're currently in. I'm going to sleep around 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. My sleep initiation insomnia has dissipated thanks to your advice. However, in the last few days, despite sleeping well, I'm extremely tired all day. At this point, I feel mentally exhausted. My eyes feel heavy, and I have rather vigorous brain fog. Worst of all, my health anxiety has reemerged, and after finding out about SFI, struggling to reassure myself, I haven't got it. I know what havoc it wreaks on your sleep architecture. I'm also aware that hypersomnia is not a primary symptom. I'm just seeking some reassurance before I start making funeral arrangements for the illness I probably haven't got. That's a joke. Thanks again. All right. Jake, thanks so much for these questions here. And, we already talked about SFI here. And I guess, again, nothing is medical advice here, but anybody who can form sentences, can think, in a logical way, in my opinion, doesn't have that. And now it's tricky because, the more you try to, oftentimes it's like, what if I have that? Then you're like, but I don't. And you try to convince your brain that you don't, then the brain can get so oftentimes it's best to kind of again, let go of that and be like, okay, I cannot know if I don't have it, and abandon the search. But more of this was about I guess I want to start with this one, and we can talk, we should definitely talk about the daytime fatigue and brain fog and all that. That's so important. But one thing I want to say that is that oftentimes people are like, I had trouble falling asleep, but now I have trouble staying asleep, or the opposite. I had trouble staying asleep and now falling asleep. And that when that changes, it can be really concerning. People think that something's changed inside of me, and it's different. And how can I get completely past this if it keeps changing? And my message is always that it's very common for somebody to have these type of changes or different patterns or things like that, but they all come from the same place. It's really always that anxiety. Sometimes the anxiety manifests as trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep, but it's really nothing newer. It's all the same. And when you know that, then you whatever helped you towards having trouble falling asleep, which it was a part of letting go and not focusing so much on falling asleep, you can apply that to staying asleep as well. So those are my initial thoughts. But what are your initial thoughts, Riley?
Yeah. So I didn't go down the SFI rabbit hole. So I won't speak too much to that. But there's great videos on this site if you want to check them out. There's a playlist, I think, too. Is that correct, Daniel?
Yeah,
okay.
There's a playlist.
Yeah. That's great to check out. I will say the range you gave was 5 to 2.
Yeah, I think it's 2 a.m. No, it's 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. Yeah.
5 a.m. to 2 p.m. Okay, yeah, which is about 9 hours in bed, which is a lot of time in bed, and it sounds like you're sleeping for
A
at
good
least a lot
amount.
of that. Yeah. So you're sleeping a lot. And so what has happened, I guess, is you're kind of like that portion of time is now in the middle of the day. And so what I might say is like, hey, pick a time you want to wake up and uh, get up at that time. And it might be kind of painful at the beginning, but it will not be painful forever. It will be painful for a little bit at the beginning, or discomfortable or uncomfortable, I guess, maybe not painful. And so I would say pick a time you want to get up in the morning and, start your day at that time. And if you got a few hours of sleep that night, that's okay. Go about your day. Um, and I think that time will begin to shift. Uh, I will say the times where I felt the most fatigued have been the times when I'm most anxious about my sleep, and so it could be anxiety producing a lot of that fatigue because you're sleeping about 9 hours, so you're not necessarily probably not tired, but that feeling of fatigue of like maybe even depressed of like, oh, everything's weighing on me, and foggy. That totally makes sense, and that I think that will definitely go away. The less kind of attached you are. Yeah, those are some thoughts about
Yeah, and I
that.
want to absolutely. This is exactly where I wanted to stay a little bit long. Let's read a little bit again. Go back to it, and I think um, I saw same thing. I'm going to sleep around 5 a.m. to 2 p.m. That's a good chunk of sleep. The last few days, this again, despite sleeping well, I'm extremely tired all day, mentally exhausted. My eyes feel heavy, and the anxiety emerge, etc., etc. And I think this is so important because it actually the first thing that I think of now that we reread a little bit here was it shows us that how many hours you sleep doesn't have that much to do with how you feel during the day.
So true.
Right? And then, and that can be so relieving for many, not particularly in your case now, Jake, but for many, it's like, okay, I don't have to get this much sleep to feel this way. So then there's less pressure to sleep, which always helps. So that's more in general here, but going back to you now, that can help you too. But most importantly, where I really want to go here is this. So how you feel during the day is really so predicated on how you think, and the fatigue we think. So there's kind of two simplifying things. There are two types of fatigue. One is the regular fatigue, the straightforward fatigue, like you ran half a marathon, your body feels tired, but in a good way. It feels tired in a good way. And you sit down and rest and you feel like, oh, feel better. That's fatigue. And then you have the fatigue that is really an emotion. And that emotion comes from like the frustration, hopelessness, anger, like and nothing works. That is like the emotional fatigue that really hasn't anything to do with sleep, but has to do with like your inability to sleep and your feelings and thoughts. And so where do I want to go with this is to say that when you're less hard on yourself and when you're less like, when you realize that, again, it's not that I can't willfully change my thoughts. I can't willfully change my emotions. When I stop trying to do that so much, again, stop trying, then I feel less fatigued, etc. So that emotional component of fatigue is so important, right?
Absolutely. It is so, so important. And gosh, the self-kindness thing is so powerful because, I was thinking about this morning. There's some things in my life right now that you would think would produce anxiety that I'm anxious about. And there's some things in my life right now that shouldn't produce anxiety that are also producing anxiety. And I can be really hard on myself when I'm feeling anxious about the things that I'm like, logically, this doesn't make sense. Why am I feeling anxious? But what's happening is my brain is telling me, hey, I don't want to feel these physiological symptoms that are associated with this thing. And so I think being kind to yourself, and what was their name again?
Oh, this was, I think this was Jake. Yeah, Jake.
Okay. So Jake, I'll say to Jake, like, be kind to yourself. That feeling of fatigue is your body telling you, I'm really stressed about this. I'm super stressed about this. So don't feel bad about feeling that way. You can kind of acknowledge it and say, that makes sense. That makes sense that I'm feeling fatigued because I'm super stressed. I'm super stressed that I might have a neurodegenerative disorder like that. It makes sense that your brain would be like, oh no, like it's incredibly unlikely that that's the case, but it makes sense that sense of fatigue would come. So kindness to yourself, And again, I think writing it out is so powerful. So taking some time to write out what you feel hopeless about, what you feel anxious about, write out, I might have SFI, and that's not to say you're saying it's true, but you're saying my brain is telling me I'm anxious about this. And so when you're writing that out, you're saying, okay, brain, I hear you. I'm going to acknowledge it. I'm not saying it's true. I'm just acknowledging that that's what I'm afraid of. And I think that in my experience, that feeling of fatigue starts to dissipate the more that we become okay with the things that we're feeling. Yeah.
Exactly. And that, exactly where I want to just finish off was to say exactly like that when you are kind of like, you feel really tired and you're like, why am I so tired? I shouldn't be this tired. What's wrong with me? That's kind of being hard on yourself. And when you're like, I am really tired, exhausted, but exactly, I quote unquote should be because I have been stressed. There's nothing wrong with you. I'm going to be kind to myself and allow myself to feel this. That is the way. And I think Jake is actually with us live here. Jake said, thanks for the advice. Recently found out that only 33 people have ever been diagnosed with SFI, which is extremely reassuring. I have no cognitive impairment and no problems. Yeah, so I'm okay. Yeah, 100%. You're totally okay, Jake. And so, yeah, I think that was all the questions for today. And super, super nice having you here, Riley. It's like, this is, I think you've probably heard me say this, but this was kind of my 2021 hopes and dreams to have yourself, Michelle, other people come and share. It's so helpful, really.
I enjoyed it. And it's funny, like I mentioned this earlier, but about a week ago, I had a couple of nights where I was stressed about lots of life change and I didn't sleep well. And guess what? My brain immediately went to, like everything is crazy again. You're going to go crazy. And I pull up Google. I'm like, and I was like, wait a second. No. But I acknowledged, I was like, okay, brain, makes sense. We went through a lot of pain with insomnia. It makes sense that you're scared of that, but that's not happening yet. We've had a couple of nights of poor sleep. So it's great to come back on and be able to, even as I'm saying things, I'm saying them back to myself, and just incredibly helpful for me too. So thanks for having me.
Anytime. And so, yeah, you take care, Riley, and we'll stay in touch. All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks for doing it.
Bye-bye.